set this up here. Happy Sunday. So I am having my dinner shake. I've been wanting to do this live for a while. However, I feel like everything just happened so quickly, and so I wanted to make sure that when I shared my story that I kind of was in a place of like, okay, in the process of healing, etc. So I wanted to just share because obviously we are expecting our baby boy. However, I had shared a couple months back that we had a miscarriage in December. And I also had shared on my story that I wanted to share my story with you guys and just kind of what I learned in my healing process, not just like emotionally, but the physical healing of that, what that was for me. And I think it's like something that's really important because when it comes to miscarriage, it's not something that people often talk about, or it kind of will come up in casual conversation and we're not so casual, but I feel like most people only talk about it after the fact or after they've successfully have gotten pregnant again. And I didn't want that to be the case. However, it kind of just happened right after I was already like in the midst of my healing process. So I wanted to wait just to kind of make sure that my emotions were in check when I shared. And so I wanted to share that with you guys. I feel like, especially, being that we have this incredible social platform that we get to connect through our stories and through our experiences. And it's just something that's really important because the reason that most women don't talk about it is because it's just the reason it's such a taboo subject is because women don't talk about it openly and share their experience. And it's just like this misunderstanding that it's something to be ashamed of, and it's not, because it's something that's so common. So, like I had shared back in December, in the beginning of December, we kind of decided like we wanted to try to have another baby, and I was still breastfeeding at the time, and so we kind of were just like, well, let's plan for it. And to be honest, it happened really fast because we had this conversation like last week of like November, early December, and by mid-December I found out, or the third week of December, I found out that I was pregnant. And so one thing that I will say is that that's something that we lack in conversation as far as like women's reproductive health and just the idea of like how you have a baby. And it sounds silly, right? Because I'm a grown-ass woman, but even with, with with Frida, with my pregnancy with Frida, I was so naive. Like I understood, obviously I know how it happens, but the process that goes into like, okay, now you have to track when you're fertile, and that's not always like accurate, right? There's all these like apps and things that you can use, but it's not like on point, right? But just like how naive we are sometimes when we consider like, okay, we want to have a baby, and just how, number one, how magically that happens, right? And it has to be like exact, and also the pre-care that happens, right? So with her, I was eating healthy. I was, in this lifestyle. And same thing with the second pregnancy that ended in miscarriage. However, there was a lot of things that I learned about what was going on with my body when that happened. So, like I said, I was still breastfeeding my daughter. She was a few months short of 2 years old. And so, although I was eating healthy, although I was taking care of myself and taking my vitamins, you do have to have enough folic acid in your body to support a growing fetus. And so, because although I was supplementing and taking vitamins, I was also, the nutrients were also going to my daughter through breastfeeding. So there was just a lot of lack of a lot of vitamins because I was still, breastfeeding. And so that's one of the things that I learned, is that although I was healthy, although I was taking care of myself and taking vitamins, it wasn't enough also to support that. Secondly, there's just so many misconceptions when it comes to why miscarriage happened, right? And I just wanted to know, right? Because the first thing that women do is like, they blame themselves, they blame their body, they start to question all of these things. And that was one of the first things that I read when I was kind of like looking into it and trying to wrap my head around this experience. And the most common thing is like women start to question themselves and am I going to be able to have a baby and all of these things. And I didn't want to fall into that trap, because that's all that is a downward spiral of like doubting yourself and questioning, God and all of that, or why is this happening to me? And so for me, like, my healing process was, I just want to know, why this happens, or what's the most common reason that this happens. And so one of the most common reasons is that it's genetic abnormality. So something happens where there isn't either enough cells, or they don't match, and it's just a thing that your body does. Your body goes into automatic mode and will abort a baby if the genetic makeup doesn't match up or something's wrong. And so that's just like the most common thing. And right away, women want to go to like, oh, there's something wrong with me, I did something wrong. And so I feel important to share that, because through sharing my story, I want someone else, I want another woman to when this happens, because it happens so often, it's so common. And because we don't talk about these conversations, we don't have these conversations, like there's a lot of women out there who go through this feeling alone, feeling like there's something wrong with them, when it's just something that is so incredibly common. Like 1 in 4 women will experience a miscarriage in their lifetime. And I know so many women, friends, family, and it's just something that they hold in, like they don't talk about it, they don't release it. And I also feel like part of the healing process for me was like, I want to talk about it. I want to talk about my experience, and not only healing, but also to keep the memory of that baby alive. And so, in kind of wanting to learn more and trying to make sense of everything, like that kind of reminded me like, oh yes, I know people who have experienced this, and because I don't talk about it, most women will feel alone. And so I didn't want to be that. I didn't want to fall into that category of like blaming myself, because I know there's nothing that I could have done differently. And so for me, it was understanding that just my body wasn't ready for that. Being that I was still nursing, and it's just, I had to build up my body to be able to carry my baby. And aside from like perhaps maybe other risk factors that maybe you have some type of chronic disease or infection, or there's just different things that are also risk factors. But if for the most part, if you're healthy, if you have a healthy body, an able body, and you're taking care of yourself as best as you can, most of the time that's just what it is. It's just a genetic abnormality, and your body just goes into auto mode. And so for me, it was just that understanding and allowing myself to have the conversation and talk about it, because I didn't want to feel like there was something wrong with me when I know there's nothing wrong with me. So misconceptions are that because this happens to you, like you're not going to be able to have a baby, or you're going to have fertility issues. Like, it's just so many things that are wrong when having this conversation. And it's really just because we don't talk about it, and we should be talking about it. Because one of the things that I learned was that you can often mistake a miscarriage for a late period, because it's exactly the same. And hadn't I been tracking and taking pregnancy tests, I would have thought the same, because it was as if I had just a late period. And it's just so crazy to think, because I just think about like how many women have experienced this and not known, and been okay and gone on with their lives. And then the woman who is actually, tracking and taking pregnancy tests and has this experience and loses their baby, it's just something that they carry with them for the rest of their lives. And it's just that awareness. And if we were having these kinds of conversations when we were growing up, talking about how a baby is made and etc., right? I think that would take away the stigma of just how common this is, and this is part of just of human nature. It's just something that happens. And so, in sharing that, I hope that brings light to someone who perhaps has experienced this, and they don't really know, how to make sense of it all, or they try to blame themselves. And I don't want any woman to feel like it's their fault when this happens, because it's just something that just happens all the time. And it can be traumatic. It can be something that they never heal from. And so I felt it important, to share that. And so for me, the healing process was, wanting to know more, wanting to know about my body and what's happening with my body. And for me, it was like I wasn't afraid to be like, okay, this happened to us, and now I don't even want to try again. For me, it was more so like, I want to work on healing my body from the inside out. But I still, I wanted to wait until I was done breastfeeding my daughter. And so that was part of the healing process for me. Was I had a plan to feed her till she was a few weeks before she was 2 years old. And so for me, the healing process was like, okay, I'm going to work on myself, on my mindset. I'm going to work on healing my body through my nutrition, which I've always been about, but more so focus on supplementation and vitamins, and healing my body in the most natural way that I can. And so it started for me with meditation, breathing exercises, and just being present in silence, not so much yoga and things like that. I was still exercising and things like that, but I really wanted to be focused on mindfulness and being in the moment with my thoughts and allowing myself to process my grief and my emotions, going through those and releasing it. And meditation for me, literally, guys, all I did was I would listen to meditation music. I'd lay on my mat and just do breathing exercises, right? Just 5 deep breaths, 3 slow breaths, different things like that. It wasn't anything super specific. It was just allowing my body to relax and allowing me to release those emotions from my body physically through the breathing. And then obviously, like I said, vitamins. So my nutrition program already provides a lot of vitamins. However, I wanted to focus on healing my womb. And so when I was, researching about that, there's a lot of, vitamins that you can take. And so I really took it serious. And I was focusing on what I researched. So making sure that I was getting enough folic acid, because like I said, folic acid is really important in getting pregnant and staying pregnant. And so I take a multivitamin, an Herbalife multivitamin, which does have a lot of the vitamins that I needed to be supplementing. However, I also added folic acid vitamin. I added vitamin D, which a CoQ10 it's an Herbalife vitamin D supplement, which also helps support a healthy womb, which would also support pregnancy. I also incorporated B vitamins, zinc, magnesium, vitamin C. And like I said, some of those products are specifically Herbalife products that I used. And then one that was super amazing that we have, which is also Herbalife, is Nightworks, which has nitric oxide, which helps support blood flow. And so one of the things that I was reading was that making sure that you're getting blood flow and oxygen to your womb is actually going to aid in fertility. And so I'm not an expert. I'm not sharing to tell you what to do, but I feel like it's important to know what part of like the healing process of that is. And so, supplements are really important, especially if you're not, whether you're not eating healthy and getting, adequate vitamins and minerals from your food. That would be the first place I would recommend to start, is to focus on your nutrition, because that's really important. And so for me, it was like, I'm going to focus the next 3 months of just healing, of being consistent with my supplements to make sure that I feel good, that I feel strong. And then into ending my breastfeeding journey with my daughter, which we stopped 2 weeks before her second birthday. And it's just so crazy because in the process, like I said, I wanted to share my story and my experience, but I really wanted to wait to be in a space where I felt like I could share my personal healing process in the hopes of, it can help support someone else going through the same thing. And so it just like, when I was ready to share about it, which was like in April, I found out that I was, in April, I found out that I was pregnant. And so the timing was kind of like, okay, let me get through this, because, that brought up a lot of emotions for me. Like, I miscarried at almost 6 weeks. It was on Christmas Eve. And so it was an emotional time, and to be back in that same place of like, okay, I found out the last time that I was pregnant, right on time, and I knew that I was, and I felt it. And then once again, this time, I knew that I was, and I felt it. I instantly knew. My body is like, I became really in tune with my body. And so, and I didn't say this, but when I had my miscarriage, I knew that something was wrong. I felt a shift. I didn't want to think about it, but I knew what was happening. I knew what was going to happen. I felt it, and I even like told my husband, like, something's wrong, something's off, like it just doesn't feel right. And then it happened. So, I feel like I'm very in tune with my body. So this time when I found out I was pregnant, I knew before, and I already was like kind of mentally preparing myself, like, okay, what's going to happen? Like, what's going to be the process? How am I going to, support myself and like not freaking out or not going back to like fear, because fear is like the thief of joy, right? And so I found out about the same time, and I didn't believe it at first. I was kind of like, I'm just like almost like going back to like, I don't want to react a certain way, because I don't know what God's plan is for me. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how I should react. And even my husband was like, kind of like, didn't know like what to think or what to say, because I feel like we were both kind of like scared because of the last experience. But, we had the conversation of like, God has a plan for us, and whatever it is, it's going to be. And we can't live every day with the fear that something bad's going to happen. And so, when we passed that 6-week mark of, okay, I didn't miscarry, I'm still pregnant. I feel like every week until the next appointment, because you don't really get seen by the doctor for a couple of weeks. And so for me, I was just kind of like, it was an everyday thing that I had to mentally prepare myself, because I didn't want to go to a negative place or a place of fear. I wanted to be present to the moment of like, this is happening, this is a beautiful thing, and regardless of what the outcome is, it's still a beautiful experience. And so that was just my focus, like every single week up until we got to go to the first appointment. And even then, up until maybe the last, we had to do, at 14 weeks, we went and did a blood work and a scan because I'm over the age of 35. Had to talk to a geneticist and just, understand that abnormalities are more common as you get older, and that conversation. So up until that appointment, and then they called me and they said everything was fine, baby's growing at a great rate, I kind of felt like I couldn't even catch my breath, kind of thing. Like it was like I was holding on until the next appointment. And it's still a learning process. Like every day you kind of just have to let go of the fear and focus on the now, and I have to remind myself, and I feel like I'm in a really good place. And so I wanted to share back in April, I wanted to share this with you guys. However, because I found out I was pregnant, and then I was just my energy was just focused on getting through those first couple of weeks, that first trimester, and just the anxiety that comes with it all. Because even though, I know that I'm healthy and that I take care of myself really, really well, and I do my best to do so, that it's out of my control. And so I was just really focusing my energy on just being present and being grateful and living in that moment. So now, being where we are in our second trimester and just feeling amazing and not allowing the anxiety to overcome, right? I feel good. I'm excited. I'm just overwhelmed with joy and finding out that we are having a little boy. It's just amazing because everything is coming full circle, and my message to anybody who has experienced this as well is don't blame yourself, because it's just something that happens so common, and I feel like we need to be able to have this conversation. Otherwise, there will always be women out there who feel alone, who feel like this is their fault, who feel like they can't, it'll never happen, or, whatever. And I feel like if we shared more of our stories, because when I first shared, I got so many messages, and just the thing that kept coming up, oh, you're so brave for sharing your story. And I'm thinking I don't do it to be brave. I did it because I know so many women who have still to this day have not talked about it, and it's something they carry. And when you carry what I've learned in my journey of growth and personal development and transformation, is the longer you carry emotional baggage, the longer you will live, you will live in fear. You're not allowing yourself to grow and evolve in the way that you can when you're holding on to emotional baggage. For me, through my weight loss journey, I realized that my emotional baggage, I began to carry it physically. And that was the manifestation of the excess pounds that I was carrying it, because there was a lot of emotional baggage that I wasn't dealing with. And so how you numb that is not always a great coping mechanisms. For me, it was drinking. For me, it was eating when I wasn't hungry. Alcoholism. Some people turn to drugs, and so it's really important that you talk about the things that you're holding on to that weigh heavy on your heart. Release those things. It doesn't even have to be you talking about it or you telling somebody. Write it down. Release it out of your heart. And the more you practice that, the better you'll feel, the better quality of life you'll have. And so I wanted to share that, because as we go forward in our pregnancy and this experience, I needed to just let that go, to release that, to allow myself to just be present to this moment in my life. And I hope that my sharing is something that gives another woman strength to release that from within herself, if that is her story, to release the guilt, to release the fear, to release the anxiety of what wasn't, what could be. I think it's really important for us to really live our best life. I know so many people who carry that with them, and it's just really sad to me, because it's not, it's not something that they could have controlled. And so I hope this message finds you well. I hope that I can, in some way, in sharing my story, and with any story that I share, to be honest, I hope that it just brings a little bit of light into someone else's life, because it's through my experience in connecting with other women and in sharing our stories that I too have been inspired and motivated to work on myself and to let go of what no longer serves me, to really live my best life. And so I'm in a good place. I feel great. Baby is growing, and now I can share with you guys, going forward. I wanted to do this first before I start sharing about my journey of pregnancy with nutrition, incorporating Herbalife. But Herbalife does not cure anything. I share with you guys how I've used my products to support my journey, every phase of my journey, and this being one of the most important journeys that I've been on is healing, postpartum healing, and healing, miscarriage, post miscarriage. So I hope this has been, insightful in some way. Like I said, I'm not an expert. This is just my experience. And if there's any way that I can support anybody else, do not hesitate to reach out. My line is always open. Line of communication is always open. And I just hope that through this, it brings you some type of healing. Happy Sunday.